is the nation's #1 talk news and sports radio station. We're broadcasting live from our audiovisual studios right here in its Maryann Crescent, Victoria Island, Lagos. Welcome to an abridged version of Hard Facts. I'm Maryann Okon. Don't forget, I beg to differ. Students' debate continues. It's still the round of 32, the playoffs. And yesterday we had two people actually emerged winners and 2 people went home. Today we have 4 more people. On the first round, we have Odunayo Salami going head-to-head with Ige Elijah. And, of course, when they get into the studio, you know the topics that they are going to be debating on. It promises to be a very interesting conversation. But, you know, it always starts very slow, and then, of course, it picks up momentum as we go. But welcome to Hard Facts. This afternoon, we're going to be talking about legislative oversights, and the reason why we have legislators to start with, what their roles are, how they have carried out their responsibilities and those roles, and has it been to the benefit of the average Nigerian? Well, I'm going to be joined by a former speaker of the Cross River State House of Assembly. I'm being joined in the studio right now by a representative of BudgIT. I will be introducing my guests in a bit, but we're going to have that serious conversation this afternoon to speak mostly about oversight functions of the legislature. Is it for accountability, or is it something that has become a tool for corruption? My name is Maryann Okon. We're live facebook.com/Nigeria Info FM. We're also live on YouTube, Nigeria Info FM. Join the conversation. We'll be right back after this break.
There's a reason why over 1 million people tune into Hard Facts every day. We discuss in-depth stories with sources behind the facts.
The Lagos State High Court has convicted, suspended the Chicago certificate story. It's never going away, is it? Show with stories for the day.
You hear diverse voices and opinions.
And she was meeting campaign with the husband, knowing that.
You should not be happy because there is nothing to happy about.
Yeah, it's quite pathetic the way the country is going.
We distinguish each story accurately with analysis.
It's Hard Facts with Maryann Okon on 99.3 Nigeria Info.
This is Hard Facts.
All right, welcome back. This is Hard Facts, and I did say we're going to be talking about legislative oversight. Could it be a tool for accountability? Is it a tool for corruption? Well, my guests are going to try to help us understand or make sense of what's been happening on the floor of our National Assembly. Joining me live right now via Zoom is Vahyala Kwaga. He's the head Open Government and Institutional Partnerships at BudgIT. Vahyala, it's so good to have you join us, and Happy New Year.
Thank you so much for having me. As always, Maryann, it's a delight to see you.
Great. While we wait for the former speaker of the Cross River State House of Assembly to join us, who obviously would be able to give us a legislative angle to this, let's start with you, Vahyala. Over the years, budget reviews have been an issue where most Nigerians just only gloss over the numbers. We don't necessarily talk about it until we hear someone raise, some alarm about, this budget was padded or this. We remember the Honorable Jibril, who's I think a senator now, back in the day, who raised the issue of budget padding. We saw what happened to Senator Ningi sometime, I think last year, if I'm not mistaken, who was suspended because he raised, an alarm. We also saw Senator Jarigbe join in that, talking about, certain things that had no nomenclature. As we speak, the last budget defense, the Universities Commission, if I'm not mistaken, also raised an alarm about the fact that they were asked for certain amount of monies to be paid for their budget to be pushed through. Now, the National Assembly said nothing about it. They only released a statement saying that this was false and no such thing happened, but no investigation took place. And as we speak, I think the Daily Trust newspaper and the Premium Times newspaper have done another report still emphasizing on that case, saying that the National Assembly has refused to investigate that panel that was accused of trying to induce, the Universities Commission. But my first question is, how can we lay the responsibility of accountability on our legislators if there's no one to check the legislature?
I mean, that's a very, very interesting question, and I sincerely hope that we have enough time to discuss this. So the problem revolves around our understanding of the nature of the doctrine of the separation of powers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want your listeners to hold on tight because I'm going to speak some English. So the doctrine of separation of powers emerged from an understanding by some old white men a long time ago that there was a high possibility that power would constantly be abused. The premise of having the separation of powers is the notion that power is always likely to be abused. So what did they do? In their wisdom, they decided to structure their government in such a way that the key arms of government, that's the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature, would serve as a check and a balance on each other. In this way, they would ensure that no one single arm of government would be, a power over the other and make arbitrary decisions. Those old men were the framers of the United States Constitution, and many of them were very instrumental to, building up the United States as it is today. The problem is that developing countries, and Nigeria being one of them, basically copied the presidential system of the United States, but did not copy the institutions of the United States, one of them being adherence to the rule of law and an implementation of the doctrine of the separation of powers. Now, we need to have a separate conversation around our political culture in the sense that it is very difficult to allow a monitor to monitor itself. There is always going to be the potential for abuse. And this still speaks or cascades down to the problem of monitoring and accountability, and whether or not we do not need to develop new systems, new frameworks to address this issue. If I would just quickly make a recommendation, some countries have separate oversight committees that consist of prominent members of civil society, members of the executive, members of the judiciary, and members of the legislature itself that sit in an oversight capacity over, the assembly, the parliament, the diet, as it's called in many countries. And this body serves as an additional check over what you rightly pointed out is an extreme example of a party or an entity that is accountable unto itself. And we can clearly see in Nigeria that giving the legislature so much power, and so much control and no oversight is a recipe for disaster. Hopefully, in the course of the conversation, we would address some potential recommendations to the general problem of separation of powers.
Let's dive into it while we wait, because our Right Honourable is taking forever to join us. Let's dive into it. In the issue of separation of powers, I mean, for Nigeria, like you have rightly stated, it is a different case entirely, because like we were taught in secondary school, the basics was that all of these arms of government are supposed to check each other. But in today's Nigeria, it looks like the executive literally has the legislature and the judiciary at its whims and caprices. So obviously, there's not necessarily any check. And so how do we call what we're doing a democracy, or even ask for accountability, if none of these bodies are responsible to each other? Instead, one person seems to be wielding the power per se. I don't want to say the big stick, but the power, because it's whatever the executive wants, the executive gets. You saw the last time Mr. President went to present the budget, everybody was saying that they were on his mandate. So how do you question a mandate that you already stand on?
Great question. So for me, it's two major issues, and I'll try to take them sequentially. The first is an over-centralization of power in the hands of the executive. Many more people, far more intelligent than myself, have identified that one clear problem of our government structure is an over-centralization of power in the hands of the executive. So the president has enormous powers to appoint a wide range of individuals, heads of agencies, and offices. And while this does have some input from the National Assembly, to a very large extent, the president has powers to appoint individuals. We're talking about the Inspector General of Police, we're talking about the head of the Central Bank of Nigeria, and the heads of various agencies and his ministers as well. When you couple this with the fact that the presidency or the executive proposes the budget, you see that we have a president that has far too much power. Now, this ordinarily should have been a thing where the legislature would strip down the powers of the executive and either grant some decision-making power or some appointment-making power to an independent organ, maybe comprised of justices, for instance. But Nigeria's return to democracy basically saw a continuance of that centralization of power in the hands of the executive. Remember, we are coming from a period where we had military rule, and military governments were essentially a fusion of lawmaking power and executive power in one. So you had the Supreme Military Council basically make proclamations in the form of edicts, which were, equivalent to laws. And, when they felt like it, they would take cases to court. But even the court, would admit that its jurisdiction stops, where the power and authority of the Supreme Military Council starts. So that's one major characteristic I think the presidency has, which leads to this problem of weak separation of powers and a very poor relationship between the executive and the legislature that in a thriving, healthy democracy should not be constantly at conflict, but should constantly keep each other at check. The second issue is a little bit more difficult to really assess because it's a political question. And I dare say that our politics has not evolved to the point where we can have civil political disagreements and it would not end up, as violence or as conflict. The reason why I say so is there are evaluations and assessments of the political climate of developing countries by, very reputable scholars. And they are of the view that developing countries like Nigeria or countries in general have what you call a political settlement. The political settlement is simply just the way the political elite in government relate to power and relate themselves to the citizens within the confines of a political system. Okay. So it's simply, what governs the day-to-day, year-to-year interactions between the political elites and citizens. So their argument is that in developing countries like Nigeria, the political settlement is very weak, as opposed to developed countries that have a strong political settlement where political elites have ceded some authority, where political elite understand that there are certain rules that cannot be breached, that there are certain rules like the rule of law that are in place to function for the betterment of everyone. They understand that there are rules, there are lines that cannot be drawn. But the political elite in developing countries do not have such, restraints to abstract rules. We see them as abstract rules. What the political settlement in developing countries is a transactional, day-to-day engagement, in the sense that your ability to control violence shows your acumen and your prowess as a politician. Your ability to spend money, to influence people, shows your ability and prowess as a politician. And what you see in developing countries with a weak political settlement is a constant attempt by political elites to fight fires. And by fight fires, I mean to quell non-state actors with money. And what you see in Nigeria, you see the Niger Delta emancipation movements, you see the bandits in the north, you see Boko Haram, you see kidnapping, you see secessionist movements in various parts of the countries. This is an example of a country with a weak political settlement, because you will always find individuals wanting to puncture and wanting to negatively influence the political settlement. So that's one reason why we have a poor democratic culture. That's one reason why our politicians are looking more to short-term transactions, why our politicians are looking at the electoral cycle as opposed to medium to long-term growth, among other things.
Meaning that at the core of whatever their goals or their, whatever it is that they're doing, at the core should be the people. But then what we have today at the core of it is not people. It's not the Nigerian people. It's about their next, their next agenda, their next campaign.
I would agree.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would agree, but I would even say that two seemingly contrasting things can be true at the same time. Politicians can have societal development as a goal and also their own, progress.
That's how it's supposed to be. That is how it's supposed to be. But is that the case here?
So it's definitely not the case. And, this brings us to the chicken and egg situation where you ask yourself, what comes first, democratic and political development or economic growth? Because if you look at history and you look at many of the countries that are stable democracies today that have a strong element of the rule of law, you see that there was a time in their history where the poor were mobilized. So there's a concept called political mobilization that entails movement of a class of people from a low level, suboptimal level to a moderately higher level, where you have better incomes, you have better access to opportunities. And if you look at the history of Western Europe, to a very large extent, one reason why democracy was able to grow and thrive, in addition to having a welfare state, was that political mobilization as a result of the Industrial Revolution. So what did the Industrial Revolution do? What did it do? It created a new class of people that were not dependent on the king or agriculture for their livelihoods, but engage in trade and commerce. And thereby you created this, new class, a middle class, as you would call it, of people that were able to put pressure on politicians because they could afford to. This still spills into our political, climb, where you see people sell their votes. Why do they sell their votes? Because they're too poor. It is not rational for a Nigerian not to sell their votes. I can say
we're going to come to that. Let's put a pin there. We have to go on a break. But just joining us via telephone is former Speaker of the Cross River State House of Assembly, Right Honourable John-Gaul Lebo. He's joining us now on the phone. We'll just take a few seconds of break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about constituency projects and, of course, the responsibility of legislators. We'll be right back. The program is still Hard Facts, 99.3 Nigeria Info.
Millions of listeners trust us.
99.3 Nigeria Info. We'll be right back.
I Beg to Differ Season 8 continues on Tuesday with riveting topics and power-packed debaters. At 4 p.m., Oduayo Salami will take on Ige Elijah in a heated debate on the topic. Nigerian celebrities are bad examples of role models. At 5 p.m., Esther Joseph will face Shulamite Ikenna to discuss everyday Nigerians, not the politicians, are the main demarketers of Nigeria. Join Femi Obong-Daniels and Maryann Okon to catch all the action. I Beg to Differ Season 8. 32 debaters, now 30. One winner, 1 million naira. Sponsored by Tollywood College, Chrisland Schools, and Obiwizi. For sponsorship, send an email to info@nigeriainfo.fm. I Beg to Differ, a tournament of champions.
We're back.
We're back.
We're back.
We're back.
We are back.
We're back on 99.3 Nigeria Info.
Millions of listeners trust us on Hard Fact. Whether it's politics, social issues, controversies, and trending stories, we're credible and objective.
It's Hard Facts with Maryann Okon on 99.3 Nigeria Info.
In case you're just joining us, this is an abridged version of Hard Facts, 99.3 Nigeria Info. We're reaching you live from our audio-visual studios right here in Itimi and Crescent, Victoria Island, Lagos. And I am Maryann Okon. We're looking at legislative oversight. Could it be a tool for accountability, or has it become a tool for corruption? Well, my guest, Vahyala, Kwaga, who works with BudgIT, and of course joining us via telephone is the former Speaker of the Cross River State House of Assembly, Right Honourable John-Gaul Lebo. Honourable, it's so good to have you join us. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Yes. Let's start by asking why constituency projects is very important. A lot of times, this is what people raise eyebrows about, constituency projects, and why legislators are very interested in these constituency projects. Let's start from there.
Okay. First of all, democracy is a culture, and every culture must serve the purpose and welfare of society. And so the legislature always look at the bottom line of being in politics to service the service economy of your community or your constituency. So in other words, your responsibility, bottom line, is to ensure that you deliver service to your people. And one of the ways you can deliver service is through infrastructure and development. So development is critical, and it comes by way of projects. I also want to say that in the larger picture in the legislature, we don't look at just projects. We look at policies, we look at programs, and then you now have projects. Because if you don't have a policy, you don't have a program, then you cannot have a sustainable project. So usually that constituency project comes from the ways of policy, program, and then projects. When the budget process begins, the legislature will make sure that from the beginning they are able to articulate projects within their constituency ecosystems and ensure that you have those projects in the budget. You first of all will have to do a situation analysis, do a gap analysis, and create a gap closure strategy. If you're serious as a legislator, you must have your own backroom staff. You must have your own structure to ensure that you do a need assessment in your community. Find out what the people want as opposed to what you want. Once you can get what the people want, then you engage with the executive and ensure that it's in the budget. The model of oversight that I'm used to, even as Speaker, and I've seen a lot of my colleagues do, is not the one that the project is awarded to the legislator himself to perform all this preferred company. It's the one that you put in the project and ensure there's a good due process mechanism in place to award it to a competent company that can deliver. Because as a politician, as somebody who wants to go back and seek for re-election after 4 years, you want to ensure that the best quality and service of projects are delivered in your constituency. So that once it's awarded, the issue of oversight comes in. Oversight is to ensure that you look at the bill of quantity, look at the policy, look at the program, and ensure that there's value for money analysis in the project delivery, and the quality is also pulled out of the project.
So, just before you joined us, I was just talking with Vahyala about, legislative oversight and, the fact that many people have actually hailed it to be, some sort of fundamental pillar of democracy. Just as you started by talking about democracy, it's supposed to bring the executive, especially hold them to some high level of scrutiny to make sure that, monies or financial whatevers are done with due diligence, just as you said. But now we see that, this legislative oversight has now become some sort of, I'm looking for the right word to describe it. It's a tool in the hands of these legislators to do whatever they want, and it's done with reckless abandon. Now, you've said something that I held on to, that if you are a serious legislator, then you should obviously know your onion, and, you shouldn't be awarding contracts to yourself. But you can't say the same for every other person, especially those at the Senate and the National Assembly. We've seen this happen recently. A Senate committee was accused of trying to, ask I think it was the Universities Commission, for a bribe so that they could pass their budget, and approve it. How do you even begin to ask for accountability if these kinds of things are happening, right on the floor of the National Assembly? And who's to say that this doesn't even also happen in states?
Well, I think first of all is let me say that one of the greatest challenges of the current Nigerian democracy is the issue of our political culture and the issue of institutional memory. If you combine the two together, that is the foundation of corruption. First, let me deal with political culture. There are certain things people do that is not right. It's not the appropriate political culture. It's not the appropriate social culture, and it's also not a sustainable value system that every serious society should have. And so what you have is that it becomes a culture with a certain clique in the legislature, finding another clique in the executive, and finding the same kind of clique in the judiciary to perpetrate themselves and fall themselves into small, little, maybe low-budget cabals, so to say, and then you find this culture permeates. Once it permeates, there are a group of people who will always follow that line. They may be successful, they may be renowned, they may be the one you find popular legislators. That happens. So you find that in that case, oversight becomes a tool of corruption in their hands. The second aspect, which is the worst, is the institutional memory. One of the biggest weaknesses of the legislature in Nigeria is that we lack stable institutional memory. Institutional memory doesn't necessarily mean that somebody has to remain in the National Assembly for 20, 40 years for us to have institutional memory. It means that basically, even if you spend one term in office, you'll be able to leave certain valuable documentation, certain valuable footsteps, certain variable legacies in terms of documentation, in terms of policies, in terms of programs and activities for somebody else to learn from. It also does not mean that the Senate president must be there forever to have. It means that he must be able to achieve certain parameters in effective and efficient administrative management for others to follow. The same thing does not happen in the executive. The executive, you have offices. So look, the civil service is such an organized system. You can't function in a service economy without the civil service. When they call somebody permanent secretary, it's not for form. That name is significant. It means that it's somebody who sits over permanent intelligence that will be transposed and passed on from generation to generation and from government to government. You don't find that in the legislature. Somebody is a House of Reps member today, a House of Assembly member today, the next day he's in the Senate. Or somebody is in the Senate today, he's in the House of Reps today, he goes to the Senate, or doesn't pass through that process, but does not have any experience about governance. Separate between politics and governance. Politicians, good, you can win election. When it comes to governance, most of the good politicians we find go silent. One is because they lack that capacity, that intelligence of efficiency to deliver, and they are not backed by the appropriate institutional memory which they can tap on to deliver. So that is one of the big problems we have. The institutional memory you have in this case, cases of corruption, is that you find a corrupt permanent secretary. Once you find a low intelligent, sorry to use the word, low intelligent legislator coming on board, you pass on that memory to him. You buy into it immediately. It's different from somebody who is experienced, knows his onions, understands capacity, and wants to deliver. So the issues of institutional memory is a big problem in Nigerian politics. What you find is that once you find one corrupt permanent secretary, one corrupt director, whose intention is to design a model for legislators, say, look, identify a project, I'll bring you a contractor, we share the money, that system continues to run. But if we have a proper culture of accountability, that issue should be sorted within the legislature and within the constitutional framework. The public account system under the Constitution, I think Section 128-29 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria deals with public account. That means that if you deliver oversight, if you have insert a constituency project in your budget, it is awarded to your preferred company and is not delivered. At the end of the day, they report to the Accountant General of the Federation of the state, returning to the House of Assembly, returning to DSS, returning to EFCC and ICPC, and then sent to the House of Assembly, to the legislature, the National Assembly, the Senate, or the House of Assembly, in the case of the state assemblies, for the purpose of report, and made available to public hearing and oversight. People should be able to question, why did you insert project this for 100 billion? It was awarded to company C and was not delivered. At that point, the judgment of society can come. To us to achieve this political value system and political culture, we need to understand the challenges we face and find a way to go around it.
I want to push you further because, you sound like, you're the one person that probably, seems to understand the certain level of governance that plays a role or coincides with legislative functions. But then I don't know if we were to do a poll or put up a poll to ask many Nigerians if there are at least, if 1/3 of the legislature that we have across the country understands what you're talking about and has not adopted that culture of corruption. Because, again, see what happened. I'd like for you to comment on what happened when Senator Ningi, sometime last year, raised that issue of things being put in the budget without any nomenclature, but then huge amounts of monies, attached to it. And we also saw your brother, Senator Jarigbe, also up in arms on that same issue. In fact, he made a statement also making it look like it was a money-sharing situation. I'd like to hear your comments on that before I play you a video of the Senate chairman, I think the senator that heads the Finance Committee in the National Assembly, and what he had to say about budget padding. But first, I want for you to answer that question, Honorable.
Well, when you have the purpose of democracy and the purpose of separation of power is to ensure that each arm of government is able to checkmate each other. So the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. Now, when you also now have the Freedom of Information Law, or Act and law as it applies to state, is to ensure that there's a watchdog over the three arms of government. You cannot rely on the cooperation and relationship with the three arms of government to be able to achieve accountability and a corruption-free democracy. If you're counting on that between the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive, they are working together in peace and harmony, you're going to achieve anything, then you're getting it wrong. There must be somebody who comes from outside of the box. There must be somebody who must come from the blind side. That's where investigative journalism comes in. That is where freedom of information comes in. That's where people can go to court and file certain action and demand certain things for that to happen. Senator Ningi, Jaibe, and the rest, there are a few legislators who cannot follow the normal rule, who are not comfortable in certain situations, or when certain things are done is not in your interest and benefit. You complain. If it's in your benefit, you will not complain. I have a proverb in my language that says, look, anybody who has a fortune does not consult a soothsayer. If fortune comes to you, you won't find out how did it come. You just continue like that. So one of the things that has also happened is that the lack of knowledge of the political processes and governance processes of how things should be done, not being available to the citizens, has also ensured that corruption continues in the country.
Okay, Honorable, just because of time, let me quickly just go to that video of the Senator Sani Musa, who heads the Finance Committee in the National Assembly. Here's what he had to say.
How you and your colleagues manage the budget in terms of what you put in them. How much the statutory is supposed to be 100 billion, isn't it? For a constituency project. But Nigerians are bothered, Senator. That some of you and your colleagues, what you do is unreasonable, in quote, insertion of projects that some of these agencies of government don't have the capacity to implement. For example, the National Center for Agricultural Mechanization in Ilorin was allocated 500 million naira to purchase security patrol vehicles for Lagos State. You wonder, what is the correlation? For example, Senator, Federal Cooperative College, or G-River, in Enugu State, got a cumulative 4 billion naira to construct rural farm roads in Essien and Etim Ekpo of Akwa Ibom State. And loads of all of these phony insertions of budget. I hope this 2025 budget, by the time we are scrutinizing it, we will not find this kind of thing there.
When we are talking about the National Assembly, have you also scrutinized the submission in terms of overheads, in terms of what do you call it, recurrent expenditures of the executive?
I'm asking the direct question to you and your colleagues on the constituency project.
On the constituency project, the essence of every representative is to be able to carry something of development back home.
Reasonably.
Well, I don't understand what you mean by reasonably.
I'm just giving
If I'm going to get 100 vehicles for security to take to rural local government, I will want it. How it comes, it does not matter to me. What matters most to me is let it be appropriated, let it be legally done, let due process take its place, and that is fine.
Are you also worried?
Okay, so that video is courtesy of Channels Television, and I just wanted to play that little clip so that Vahyala, you can hear it, and so that the Honourable would quickly respond, and then I'll come back to you, Vahyala, because I know that BudgIT actually wrote a report and sent it to the National Assembly, picking up on all of these insertions, but Right Honourable, you heard the senator that is sitting on the Accounts Committee saying he doesn't care how these things come as long as he gets to, his constituency. What does that even say on the level of accountability and following through with due process?
Well, that I would say, like lawyers will always say, res ipsa loquitur. The audio speaks for itself. That is the state of the country, that is the state of the legislature. If we were to do a situational analysis or the gap analysis or the gap closure strategy, you find out that we are at a poor state. That is where we are. The second aspect is that I do not expect the senator to make the assertion that it does not matter where it comes from. It matters where it comes from. Because in this case, if one local government or one his constituency can get 500 or 200 vehicles, what will happen to other constituencies? How many are there in the country? We have about 300 and something federal constituencies in the country, 300 and something. How will that balance? How will you achieve that that spread and balance in terms of physical allocation and physical responsibility to across the state. That's the other aspect. The third aspect is what I already said. If our demographic culture is continuing to count on the sincerity of the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, put together the three key institutions of government for us to achieve accountability and good governance, then we are going to fail as a country. The institutions, the blindside institutions, the blindside institutions like private individuals, private investigators, private companies, media organizations, individuals, human rights groups who owe themselves, their society, that responsibility. Because here you're talking about justice for the bulk of Nigeria. The service you deliver, if I'm Senate President, I put all the projects in my constituency and the next constituency has no project, how will you achieve balance and development? What if it happens that you put, because one of the challenge of constituency projects is that most cases where legislators get involved in the award of contract of constituency project, it is never delivered. It is never delivered. If you check the ratio, there's been several reports by BudgIT, Transparency International, you can see it is very clear. Check the solid mineral extractive industries. Once politicians get involved in the award of projects, it doesn't work. And you see, when we get involved, we don't look at what is the policy of that project, what is the program of that project. We just want the project. So it's not sustainable. You go and award boreholes in an area that has no road access. And in an area that they don't have lights. They have a borehole, they need to pump water, they have no light, they have no access road. How will people access it? So these issues are all there. So it is one of the challenges that we have to do. The takeaway be that we need a fourth institution to hold those in government accountable. We can no longer trust everybody in government as being accountable to the people and being transparent in the management of our national resources.
Interesting. Vahyala, let me come back to you before I open up the phone lines. By the way, we're live, facebook.com/Nigeria Info. This is Hard Facts. We're talking about legislative oversight, a tool for accountability or corruption. Vahyala, what would you like to add? I mean, the Honourable has put his own matter to rest. He's saying that he's left the Wahala at the feet of the media, of course, the fourth estate of the realm, meaning that we have our job cut out for us because there's no trust anymore in leadership. And that's where you also come in, Budget, because we partner with people like you. We rely on you to give us statistics and data, and with a fine comb, look through all of these things and give us something to run with, right?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Maryann. And thank you, Right Honorable, for your very, very candid and frank remarks. Sincerely, if we had more legislators like you, I don't think our problems would be this bad. I will even add that for state legislators, the problem of autonomy is even compounded because not financial autonomy in real sense. There is still some control that the executive has over their budgets, and the same is extended to the judiciary. But I'd like to add that the role of the federal legislature in this issue of budget padding, I think, is a flagrant violation of the doctrine of the separation of powers, because the legislature is playing dual roles. The legislature is the one proposing projects and also approving them. Nowhere in the world would that make sense, except in a country that has, thrown out the principles of democracy, thrown out the principles of equity and justice. And I would like to see a situation where this matter is actually taken to court, because this is not the first time that it has come to national consciousness or debate. Should the federal legislature be allowed to insert projects into the budget? And I suspect that the judiciary will rule that it is not allowed. And this again speaks to the problem of our national budgeting framework, in the sense that we do not have an organic budget law. What we have are various, provisions and statutes scattered across different types of laws, from the Constitution to the Fiscal Responsibility Act to the Audit Ordinance, to the Finance and Control Management Law. We need a comprehensive budget law that states the specific roles, responsibilities, and limits to the powers of the various arms of government and the various government offices, involved in that transaction.
Okay.
So I'd like to end by saying that, civil society is constantly ready and willing to partner with the legislature. In fact, we have been approached by the Research Directorate of the National Assembly to provide some form of capacity building. And we hope to carry the public along in how we can help, the analysis and technical evaluation, because I recall the Right Honorable said that there is a lack of capacity, technical capacity to engage with the budget.
Yeah.
And we do see that at the federal level. So we hope in the coming weeks, we'll be able to put our money where our mouth is as an organization.
Well, I have just 6 minutes on the clock and I want to take a few calls. The numbers to call 0201-465-7190. Right Honorable John-Gaul Lebo is a former speaker, two-time speaker actually, of the Cross River State House of Assembly. And of course, we have Vahyala Kwaga, who works with BudgIT. One of my favorite persons from BudgIT, by the way. Vahyala, have you thought about running for office? I'm just asking.
I'm afraid Nigerians would hate someone like me.
Anyway, the phone lines are open. Let's take your thoughts quickly. Please go straight to the point. 60 seconds is all you have. Hello. Welcome to Hard Facts.
Good afternoon, Maryann.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to your guest.
Go ahead, quickly.
This is Pastor Ladipo. You see, Maryann, this issue is very complicated. Do you know why? Those who are supposed to talk, like the Honorable suggests that the fifth column, like the journalists and all the people that are supposed to be involved. What these politicians have succeeded in doing is this. They have successfully built some certain strongholds. So they have their own journalists, they have everything to themselves that even if you want to penetrate to find out, ask BudgIT what it used to cost them to even find out some of these facts. They will have to go through a lot of bureaucracies. So for me, both those who are supposed to oversight, and all of everybody has been compromised.
All right. Thank you very much, Pastor Ladipo, for calling. 60 seconds is all you have. Hello. Welcome to Hard Facts.
Hey, good evening.
Good evening. What's your name, sir? Where are you calling from?
You have Ugochukwu from Akaribo Road in Shagar.
Go ahead.
My question is to your guest. I don't know whoever wants to answer the question should answer the question. Like they said, the budget, extra 700 billion naira was added to the budget by the National Assembly. I want to know, and they also said that the journalists are not really doing their job in respect of exposing them. Why should they be giving out contracts? What are they doing there themselves, those CSO? What are they doing to make sure that all these loopholes are covered and to make the public know what is really going on in the National Assembly? Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Vahyala. I think that question is for you, civil society.
Thank you so much for that question, sir. And I do get your concern. Civil
you
society
have to answer in 60 seconds because of time.
So it's as bad as we once carried a policy brief where we criticized the National Assembly to their doorsteps. We attended an event, a town hall meeting where we were invited by the Speaker of the House, and we gave them a policy document where we exposed some of the project insertions that were referenced earlier. And they literally drove us out of that place. They literally drove us out. So that's how far we go. Not only do we publicize these things on our platforms, but we take it to the doorstep of the National Assembly. And sometimes it costs us. So Nigerians, please rest assured that most 99% of civil society organizations are working for the benefit of the people. At least I can say BudgIT is.
Great. Hello, welcome to Hard Facts.
Hello.
Yes, good afternoon. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon. Sunday boy here.
Hey, Sunday. Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Maryann.
Good afternoon.
And to your guest, good afternoon as well. And one thing I just want to ask is that when Tunde Diagbon was in power, then everybody knows they were not taking it kindly with anybody that is going into all this embezzlement and whatever. What happened then? I think people sit tight. Even for you to split outside like this, to drop a stick of cigarette, you will be thinking of who's going to be the next person behind me. Why would we have government that is serious so that people that are working under them will be serious as well?
Okay, Sunday.
Because when the top is rotten, what happened to the taproot? The taproot must definitely All right. It is rotten.
Sunday, thank you very much for calling. Because of time, I have to let you go. Honorable, maybe you should answer Sunday, because he's asking if the head is rotten, then obviously what happens to the whole body?
Well, first of all, John-Gaul was a military regime, was not a democracy. So the military enforcement is there. Under a democracy, friendly fire, you can't go too hard on people. But he's right. Once the head is rotten, nothing is left. Like they always say, if gold can rust, what will happen to iron? So it's a bad situation, but like we say, we must take responsibility to hold government accountable. We can't count on those in government to hold themselves accountable.
All right, because I have just 1 minute before I let you gentlemen go, I have a quick break coming up. I just want to read some messages, and then we can go on that break. When we come back, I'll be saying my goodbyes. You can send a message to us on WhatsApp, 080-959-75805. We're live on Facebook and YouTube. Go ahead and post your comments on our live feed. Let me just take one quick call, and then we'll go on a break. Hello.
Hi, Maria.
Yes. You have 60 seconds, 52 seconds, actually.
Well, I greet your guest.
Thank you.
Honorable, what I'm even suggesting is my opinion. I think any of these public offices, like our politicians, in every sector, anyone who found, lacking, should be sacked, because we can't continue on this like a ministry of power. And it's high time they start living up to accountability and, transparency to Nigerians. Thank you. This is my own opinion. I want to contribute.
All right. Thank you very much. We have to go on a break. When we come back, I'll be saying my goodbyes to my guests. Stay with us. It's still Hard Facts. 99.3 Nigeria Info. Don't forget, I Beg to Differ comes up at the top of the hour. We'll be right back.
Millions of listeners trust us on Hard Fact. Whether it's
99.3 Nigeria Info, we are more than just radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Nigeria Info FM. Check us out on Facebook at Nigeria Info 99.3. Follow us on Twitter at Nigeria Info FM and on Instagram at Nigeria Info FM Lagos for live updates as it happens. 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.